All right, we are live on Facebook Live here with Jeremy Moss. We'll kind of get things started once we get 10 or so people on here. We don't have anybody yet, so we'll just kind of hang around until we get people on. All right, hello everybody. We're just kind of gonna wait a minute or two till we get 10 or so people on, and then we will start the Facebook Live. All right, we're gonna go ahead and start. Hi Ross, how you doing, buddy?
California Pride there, joining Vinci tonight.
All right, so thanks for joining us as we have Facebook Live for Week 5 of the regular season as Monroe City. Homecoming week this week for Monroe City. They face the West Hancock Titans, the first ever matchup with West Hancock. West Hancock has a little bit of a connection with Monroe City as Jim Unruh, the offensive coordinator for West Hancock, coached Brock Idris, and I think a lot of the offensive schemes that Monroe has came from that wing tee that Jim Unruh ran at Carthage that West Hancock runs. So we're going to have a mirror image of each other on the offensive side tonight. Again, homecoming week, always a little bit of a strange week preparation-wise as the students have all the other things going on during the week. They don't get their normal Fridays as you have the parade. So, something that Monroe's going to have to be careful of is not coming out sluggish. But this should be a great matchup. 3-1 teams. Monroe still ranked, tied for 8th in the state this year. West Hancock in Class 2 of Illinois is receiving votes. They would be roughly 12th or 13th. Again, as we go through that, we want this to be an interactive experience. Feel free to jump in with questions. We have we have some things, some talking points, but as we go through, we'll try to answer questions as best we can. Ross, I'm sorry. We call the game on the radio. I cannot give a spread. I'm sure there probably are people that you could contact that would give you a spread that they think, but we cannot do that. So, again, we're going to talk about Monroe football. We're going to talk about Monroe City softball. We'll talk a little bit about Missouri football. And then, we have a couple questions from the mailbag this week. And then we will have some, some questions, whatever comes up along the way. I'm here with Jeremy Moss. This is his first experience in the booth tonight, and he'll join us here for Facebook Live, and as well as he will join us for the radio broadcast again. 6:40 on the air tonight. I've been told that there will be no issues tonight with the radio, so it will be 107.5 The Lake. And it will be on the TuneIn Radio app.
Yeah, so thank you, Michael. Big shoes to fill. Got Ryan out running around in Oklahoma right now, so jumping in for Ryan in a big game tonight. It doesn't get much better than what we got right now. The weather is finally broke. We don't have 90-degree heat. We've got cooler weather, overcast skies. The barbecue grills are fired up over here at the Lions Club field, tailgating going on, and crowds starting to funnel in, and it's homecoming, so it can't get much better than that. Plus, we've got a Missouri-Illinois matchup, which is always intriguing when it comes to the football side of it. I know from our playing days and even some of the interviews earlier this year from the West Hancock players, they're excited to get the chance to come to Monroe, play Monroe, and really to determine who's best, as in Missouri or as in Illinois football. And both teams coming in 3-1. West Hancock had the opportunity to play Clark County at home a couple weeks ago and took the loss. So it'll be interesting tonight. We've got two of the similar offenses with the wing tee. Really a bowling ball of a back from West Hancock coming in, a fullback that is going to get 20-plus carries tonight. Really one of two of their main running backs in the backfield. So it's going to be exciting football, and I got a feeling it's going to come down to O-line and D-line play. Of course, I would say that as an offensive lineman and a defensive lineman. So.
Absolutely, and you are a good one as well. On the West Hancock, something, kind of the, mirror image, when you think about, as we talk about West Hancock, think about Bryce Wilson in the Keenan Batzel, Cole Pennywell role, and then the Dooley kid will be their other running back, and he would be what we look at as the Zach Osborne role. Maybe not as explosive as Zach, but again, he last week over 300 yards rushing against Q&D, 200 yards plus for Dooley, 100 yards plus for Wilson, and they're going to get 30 carries between the two of them tonight. Offensively up front, we got to get stopped. We got to get offensively. We got to get West Hancock off the ball, and then we got to stop the fullback early and often, because if they get 4 or 5 yards of carry with Wilson, we're going to see it all night long, and they're just going to keep pounding him. We got to stop it early.
Yeah, good. A little bit of perspective for you. Over 4 games, Dooley and Wilson have accounted for about 1,200 yards of total offense, averaging 300 yards a game. Wilson, I'll give him some credit. He's got, in my opinion, the best nickname in high school sports right now, the Pinball Wizard. So we're going to play the Pinball Wizard tonight. So pulling a little bit from the Who here. And that really has to do with his ability to bounce off tackles. The rumor has it he puts up 225 on bench 41 times, maxed out on bench 365, puts up 560 on squat. So no arm tackles tonight. It's really going to be a key for the front D line from Monroe to really get in there, cause some havoc, and open up some holes for the linebackers so they can group tackle on Mr. Wilson tonight. Yeah, or should I say the Pinball Wizard tonight?
The Pinball Wizard, and he's a unique player. I mean, he's 5'5" and 200 plus pounds. Something you don't see a lot of that size, and a lot of times you don't see them as the number one rusher at that size. But he is their school's all-time leading rusher. I believe he's over 2,600 yards now rushing in his career. I mean, he's had a great career there. Last year they were undefeated in the regular season, lost in the playoffs. Which brings me to Monroe City today. This is a new experience for a lot of these kids. 18 wins in a row. They win the state championship last year. First 3 games this year. Now they're coming off a loss. A lot of these kids have not experienced a loss at the varsity level, and it's going to be crucial to see how they come off that loss, how they rebound, how they get back to the basics, and how they play tonight. And they can't let last week's loss carry into this week. And I saw the comment about golf. We're just going to say no comment on whether there's ever been any kind of incident at Macon. No comment. There may or may not have been. We
know nothing about it.
We don't remember. We don't remember.
It's been so long ago. I think we talked about last week's game a little bit, Mike. We just transitioned off of that. Yeah. So you're right, Mike. This sophomore class, these seniors haven't experienced a loss really since the state championship loss their sophomore year. And there's good and bad to that. It really depends on how they respond. A lot of youth, or I should say some older individuals in that secondary, a lot of them on the offense and defense as well that are new to their role. Good experience last week. The one great thing about it is that wasn't the last game of the season. So you learn from it, you develop from it, and you get better. And like I was saying earlier today, conference championships are cool, but state championships are way better. So you got to keep focus on the goal at hand and keep driving towards that goal.
Right, and you never know how people are going to come away from this, because another thing is you have a lot of guys that have never lost, and after being told, when you're a high school kid and you're told how good you are over and over again, you start thinking that how good you are. And, maybe last week for some of these guys, not saying that any of, I have no knowledge that any of those guys think that way, but last week was a eye-opener to say, hey, first of all, we're in 2A football, we're not in Class 1 anymore. And secondly, we're going to have to come out and play, our best game every week to come away with the victory. I see Ross has a question about Monroe City's defensive strategy. It is a new experience this week for the Monroe City defense. Last week and every week prior to that, we faced the spread. Now, last week with Macon was a lot more passing than the other teams did, and a lot more successful passing. Tonight, we're back to the old school double tight, wing tee, pound the ball. Like we talked about last week a little bit. In the game now, the spread is the norm. When we played 17 years ago, the spread was the exception. Double tight, pound the ball was the norm. that's been reversed. But now we got a team we got two double tight teams. Monroe City, faces this, sees it every day in practice. They should be ready. The one thing that is going to be crucial for Monroe City, big loss on their defense. Nolan Pennywell, who was on his way to an all-conference type year at linebacker, led the team in tackles for loss, led the team in sacks, interception, fumble recovery, all around the ball, out possibly for the year, out for a considerable amount of time anyway. So Monroe's going to have to find some people to fill in that production. I mean, he was our second leading tackler, causing havoc in the backfield. We need we need somebody to step up in that role. And, it might be by committee. It looks like Antoine Battle might be getting the first look at that linebacker spot. Danny Dennison might get some look there as they try to find a way to fill that role. And tonight of all nights is the time you need it. You need that, and the one thing that Monroe doesn't have, maybe Dennison brings it a little bit, is, Nolan's size and hitting ability against a team that's going to be downhill, a hard fullback to tackle, speed in the backfield. We're going to need him. So,
just a little perspective too. When we talk about the run game, they may be the only team we face this year that throws less than we do. Only throwing 9 times this year as a team. Only 5 times from the QB itself. Peyton Dooley has had a couple halfback passes, so we've got to be aware of that. But for the most part, I think we're going to see us really crowd the box and be extremely aggressive towards the run this evening. And like Michael said, it's really going to come down to that front 5 there. Can we create enough hesitation or havoc in the backfield to open up holes for our linebackers to stop the big man as he bounces through there? The concern is what we see from this wing tee at a West Hancock is you'll see the guard pull quite a bit, kick out the D tackle, and you'll see him load up with the other backs leading the way for big pinball wizard. And if they get hat on hat, he will break them, and he'll break it open, and he does have the speed and the breakaway speed. Now, I think we've got some guys that can catch him, but on this turf, as opposed to the grass field they play on in West Hancock, I think you're going to see him. It's going to be a challenge to see him to slow him down for sure.
Right, and before we go, we're going to go talk a little Monroe softball after this. But before we talk about that, we talked about Clark County beating them. Whole different experience. That was the day that we got that torrential downpour. The 2 days before, muddy mess, and at that Hamilton field, it looked like they were playing in a bog. I mean, it was just muddy, nasty, wet, whatever. Now on the turf, whether or not that's going to play a role, but for West Hancock, I can't tell you. But I know they had quite a few turnovers in that game, and tonight, great weather condition, a cooler night. Actually, some football weather tonight on the turf. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, West Hancock ended up 3 fumbles during that game. 2 of them on the goal line. Quite frankly, cost them a couple touchdowns early in that game. Now, I will say, with that said, Clark County was able to put over 300 yards of total offense on West Hancock's defense in the same conditions. So their defense has, we have the ability to rack up some yards and rack up the score on them. It's a matter of if we can stop the combination of Dooley and Wilson on our side of the ball.
All right, before we talk about softball, Ross, I saw your question. Monroe City, 96 every day. I mean, we're homers. We got to take Monroe City over that California 97 team. So, sorry about that. All right, so
he's outnumbered on this Facebook Live too, by the way, for Ross.
So, let's talk about the Monroe City softball team. 10-1 start to the season, with a couple rainouts, but they've been dominant this year. The only loss, a 16-inning loss to Columbia Hickman, one of the biggest schools in the state. They lose that game 2-1 in a game that was scoreless through 15 innings. Monroe scores 1 in the top of the 16th. Hickman gets 2 back in the bottom of the 16th. But 10-1 start. This is, I've seen him play. I saw him play Saturday in the tournament. This might be the most overall, the best team overall for Monroe softball. I mean, 1 through 9, this might be the best lineup we've had in a number of years. We still have an ace pitcher in Mackenzie West. Our other 2 pitchers are very good as well. Just a very good softball team. I got some stats from Coach Chin. You have just kind of going through the line, leading hitter in average is Lauren Youngblood, a junior, hitting over 500, hitting 514. But also you have Riley Smith and Skylar Cobble over 400. Mackenzie West is hitting 350, but also has 7 extra base hits and a couple home runs included in that. Freshman Carly Youngblood has really come on, had a couple big games in the last week and a half. As a freshman, she's playing, and that's not even including Bailey Hayes, Riley Quinn, the super sophomores we have. We really
a lot of youth. Yep, a lot of youth in the softball team. And I tell you one thing that I know Coach Shin will say: these girls they dedicated to softball several months out of the year, starting in the summer and then rolling right into the fall ball. So congratulations to them on an awesome start.
Right, and just a ton of athletic ability. Looking through their team stats, 25 steals. They have yet to be caught stealing. And this week I know they have senior night on Monday night against Louisiana, and then I think they play on Thursday night against the Canton team that they played in the round robin tournament on Saturday. And came back and won that game, but Canton, again, a good football or a good softball team, and it's an exciting year. I think this year Monroe City has a real shot of making a run. I know the town's kind of excited. The crowds that they've had for the softball girls have been good. I like seeing the football guys and some of those guys out supporting the softball team, like those girls support the football team. And as we go forward, later in the year, next Facebook Live, we're going to start looking at districts and a team, Monroe City team that they beat Palmyra also last week, beating our big rival there in a big game. This is a team that is trending towards being the number 1 seed in a district and a chance to make a run, which Northeast Missouri typically, and especially in the lower classes, is going to be one of the more dominant softball teams. Last year, Bowling Green, I think, won a state championship. Centralia's won a state championship. Canton's made a run. Palmyra, over the years, has made some runs. I think maybe this is Monroe's time. They have the 3 big seniors in Smith, Cobble, and West. Their last year, and would like to see a run for them, and wish them success, and we'll be continuing to follow them as we go along through the year. And next week we'll also try to have the updated stats and just kind of keep everybody updated on that. And then quickly, as we are, we got about another 12 minutes of the Facebook Live before we have to get ready for the broadcast. Missouri football, the biggest game of the year for Missouri football, probably their biggest home game of the year. Tomorrow afternoon, 11 o'clock start. They play the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia, number 2 in the state, or no, number 2 in the country. Last year in that game, Drew Lock and company, they put a lot of points on the board. Drew Lock, 4 touchdown passes, just could not stop Georgia. Georgia wins that game 53-28. Tomorrow afternoon, a tough chore for facing that Georgia team.
Yes, it will be a tough chore, and I'll tell you, watching last week against Purdue, the defense better come back stronger than what they showed. It was a shootout last week. Now, can't say a whole lot of bad things about the offense. I thought they came out and executed well, especially considering that Emmanuel Hall set out a good majority of the second half. But man, that pass defense was rough last week, and if Fromm gets out if we allow that to happen against Georgia and allow Fromm those pass lanes, we're in for a long day in Columbia. I'm hopeful that Odom has cleaned that up this week, and we'll see a stronger defense, especially at home.
Yeah, and Coach Odom mentioned that a little bit about some systematic changes they're going to make this week. The only issue I had is, and I believe that, Coach Walters, the defensive coordinator, said it in the post game, is that they came out expecting Purdue to run, which is why they kind of set back in the zone a little bit more and, trying to play the run. But the fact is, after 300 yards in the first half, you'd think they made the change. That change didn't happen. The defensive line is getting absolutely no pressure. The only guy that's doing anything on that defensive line is Terry Beckner Jr. The other guys, last week were just basically non-existent. Now, on that, going to that a little bit though, if you're gonna only rush 4, those 7 guys cannot let guys just run wide open, which is what the Purdue offense, their receivers were running wide open the majority of that game. Luckily enough, Missouri has a guy named Drew Lock that's really, really good at quarterback. His stats this year, I ran those today, 78 of 113, 69% passing, which the big knock on Lock has been accuracy, not an issue this year. He's thrown for 1,062 yards, which is 354 yards per game, 11 touchdowns, 1 interception. On the ground, better game last week, but before the first 2 weeks, nothing on the ground. Last week, Roundtree was pretty successful, and he's run for 279 yards this year. And then Emmanuel Hall, in basically 2.5 games, 18 catches, 430 yards, 3 touchdowns, averaging 143 yards a game. Didn't play for the majority. Had 1 catch in the second half is all last week. But
and he missed one to start the game that went right through his hand. That would have been another long touchdown pass from Emmanuel Hall.
Yeah, and just a different, Georgia offensively. Fromm is completing 80% of his passes. Their running game is, even losing Sony Michel, Chubb, the running back, Nick Chubb, the running back. They still have, 2 or 3 excellent running backs. Good offensive line. Missouri's going to have to play both sides of the ball, which is scary seeing how they played last week. But, the one thing is I think offensively we got a shot to stay in the game, and hopefully it'll be a good one tomorrow. Again, 11 o'clock, weird start time. We'll see how that affects it. But, we'll kind of go from there. About 8 minutes to go. We do have some questions that were sent in. The first question, again, our favorite mailbag guy, the mayor of Huntington, Missouri, Brad Williams, and his weekly rules question was a question that we've talked about a little bit, tailgates and whatnot, is can a kicker during the kickoff step across the line as they make the kick? And the answer is yes, they can. They are specifically exempted from the offsides rule. If a kicker is in the process of making a kickoff, they can step across during the kick. So that is an exception, and that's the rule question for this week.
From the mayor of Huntington.
Yeah, we also had a question from Ricky Brandt, who I don't know if I mentioned it, but for the next 37 minutes, they have the FFA barbecue over at Lions Club Barn. Great barbecue food, free will donation. This is going to go to the FFA's running it, going to the Buddy Pack system that helps out all the kids during the weekends that may not have enough to eat. They get this together, and it's a good program, a great organization in the FFA, and I'm sure it's great food over there. Just go on over there, get a meal, and then come back for the game. But Ricky asked, a newcomer to Monroe City. His question was, who is the fastest player to play at Monroe City? And we certainly had a lot of fast ones. The first one that popped in my head from my playing days was Jason Shin. Jason Shin, an all-state sprinter, has basically all the 200, 400 the track records here, and in a straight line, there's probably not a person that I've seen that I would take over Jason Shin in a straight line. Now, a couple of the other ones that were mentioned, Joshua Robinson. He was after my time. I did not see him play, but I know he was a great sprinter, great 100 runner. Came from California, and he was a great speed guy. And then Marcus Summers on that '94 team, just his raw athletic ability was probably. On raw athletic ability, there's probably not a whole lot of people that can touch him. Jeremy, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think, for starters, I think we've got some folks out there from different generations of Monroe football. Feel free to share your thoughts on who the fastest Monroe football player is. Football is kind of you can define speed in a couple different manners. There's explosive speed, and then there's speed that I think Chin had, which was he consistently carried that speed through 400 yards, 200 yards. So my mind immediately went to Jason Chin, but you can make the argument out there. There was Derek Minner. You got him. He was a super quick running back in the day. Marcus Summers immediately popped into my brain as well. But I said that
Andre White.
And in fairness, you can make the argument too. We got a couple kids on this football team that that'll push that with Osborne and Hayes, both super fast players. So here's the good thing about that: you can't teach speed, and we've had a lot of it here in Monroe City over several years. So I feel free, if anybody's got any thoughts out there, love to hear what your thoughts are for the fastest Monroe City football player.
You know, Monroe City certainly has not been blessed with a lot of height over the years, but speed, there's not a lot of argument. We've had a ton of speed. Chris, that's a great question. I don't know the answer. I think 94 was probably the most talented team over those 2 years, 94 and 96. I think the 96 team, there's just something special about that team. You know, just they came together, and their 11 guys. I mean, that was probably the most one of the funnest playoff runs that year. You know, you have a Herman team that was just phenomenal. You beat them late in the game. You beat Palmyra late in the game after Palmyra beat us in the regular season. That John Burroughs game, overtime game, and, you know, the state championship was almost a letdown after those 3 games. But
I think you can make the argument that the 96 team is the definition of peaking at the right time. They came together right at the playoffs. Never forget the Herman game. Played a great Herman team. It had Herman wore some Under Armour clothes or some type of sweatshirt underneath their pads. That the outcome of the game may have been different. For those who weren't there, there was a sheet of ice really across the field in the stands everywhere. It was cold,
and they were wearing cut-off jerseys.
Yes,
no undershirts, just short sleeve cut-off jerseys in 30-degree weather, ice on the field. You know, that 96 team, I will say, some of the most exciting plays in Monroe history. That Herman game, Lamont White in a snow, nasty, horrible footing, returns a kick for a touchdown. You have the entire John Burroughs game, just great plays late in that game. Palmyra going for 2 late. Ryan Watson hitting Lamont in the back of the end zone to take the lead in that game.
Of course, John Burroughs, you can't, yeah. But I tell you what, 94 team, it doesn't get better than Aaron Crow, Jamar White, and Marcus Summers in the backfield. That was
great line. Kevin Braxton on that line.
Yep.
You know, in that 94 team, you know, the playoff run may not have been as fun, but that state championship game, Warsaw, down in Springfield, Warsaw goes up 12-0. Monroe comes back. Jamar White with a big punt return, I think, for a touchdown to kind of set us off, and then, you know, relied on, just those 3 impressive backs. Ryan Ogden had a big pass play to Jamar that game too. Ryan Ogden, a kind of a forgotten quarterback, but, you know, state champion, very good player. So that's kind of what we have for Facebook Live. We did have one question, and Brad had asked me what our last defensive touchdown was. I did not remember. We've kind of figured out that the last defensive touchdown from Monroe, not counting the kick returns, which we had the punt return 2 weeks ago from Blake, was Keenan Batson last year against Louisiana, returning a fumble for a touchdown. And, you know, unfortunately for Keenan, Louisiana not on the schedule because we talked about this a little bit before the game. You know, I'd love to know how many touchdowns he has against Louisiana. His 8th grade year, he had 7 against them. We know he had at least 2 last year against him. So, you know, he could have a career just on playing Louisiana. But anyway, it is coming up on 6:30. We want to thank you all for joining us again. You know, this will be back, available for replay. And 6:40 pregame. Everything, I've been assured that 107.5 The Lake and the app is going to work tonight. We'll be on the air calling a fun game against West Hancock. Join us. We'll have a lot more on the game in the pregame, and we'll go from there. Again, thank you all for watching, and catch us in about 10 minutes.
Take a second and comment on the live feed on your guess on tonight's score. We'd like to see who's closest. We can talk about that next week as well.
Also, and, the one thing I did want to throw out, Monroe City, big loss in the community. Albert Spalding, kind of a pillar, passed away. We do want to send condolences to the Spalding family. Big loss for the community. So we thank you all for joining us, and we will be on. It's 30 minutes and 30 seconds to game time, so we'll be on the radio. Thank you all.